The desert wind carried dust like whispers of the dead. Out here in the far reaches of New Mexico territory, the land itself looked scorched by God's own hand, red messes standing against the sky, sagebrush rattling under the relentless sun, and trails that stretched into nothingness. A man could ride for days without finding water, and still further before finding mercy. John Carver knew that truth too well. He was a rancher by necessity, not by choice. Life had bent his back early, left scars across his knuckles and heart, but hadn't broken him yet. He owned a modest spread. 36 head of cattle, a stubborn mule, and a stretch of land the county sheriff once told him ain't worth the paper the deed's printed on. But it was his, and he'd be damned if he let it go. That morning, Carver stood outside the crook porch of his cabin, a coffee tin in one hand, shotgun resting against the post. The horizon shimmered with heat. His eyes narrowed. Something was moving out there. Not cattle, not dust devils either, a figure. Closer it came, slow but certain, until the outline of a woman took shape. She wore a long, tattered dress, him-stained with road dirt, boots scuffed near to ruin. A shawl clung to her shoulders, though the heat was near unbearable. By the time she reached the porch, her face was streaked with sweat, her breathing shallow. She stopped at the foot of his steps, raised a hand, and knocked on the wooden frame of the porch beam. Not on the door, on the beam, softly, like she was asking permission from the very walls of his house. Carver frowned. "Mom, you lost." Her eyes lifted, and he was struck by the fierceness in them despite her exhaustion. Hazel eyes, clear and sharp as a mountain stream. "I was told you need a cook," she said. Her voice was steady, though her body trembled. "I'll work for free, forever." Carver blinked. He had heard some strange propositions in his life. Gamblers promising fortunes, outlaws begging for mercy, sheriffs swearing justice. But never that. "Forever," he echoed. She nodded once. "As long as you'll have me. Just let me stay." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind rattling the dry grass. Carver studied her. She wasn't young in the way saloon girls were young, painted with rouge and laughter. Nor was she old and bent. She was perhaps 25, maybe 26. Life had carved lines at the corners of her mouth, not from age but from hardship. He set his coffee aside. "What's your name?" "Clara." "No last name. Not one I keep anymore." Carver rubbed at the stubble on his jaw. Something about the way she stood, straight, back though wary, defiant though vulnerable, made him pause. He could have turned her away. God knows he didn't have coin to feed another mouth. Not even his own proper. But there was a storm in her eyes that told him if he said no, she'd walk straight into the desert and never look back. And he wasn't the kind of man who let souls wander into the grave if he could stop it. "All right, Clara," he said at last. "You can stay. But not for free. You work, you eat. Same as me. No promises past that." For the first time, her lips curved into something almost like a smile. "Fair enough." The days that followed carried with them a strange rhythm. Carver rose with the dawn, saddled his mule, and rode the fence lines. Clara rose too, already moving in the kitchen when he returned. He'd grown used to beans charred in the pan and biscuits so hard they could break a tooth. Now he found the smell of cornbread waiting, or stew simmering with wild herbs she'd foraged by the creek. She kept busy, scrubbing the floorboards, patching the curtains, even mending his shirts with stitches finer than anything he'd owned in years. She asked for nothing, not even thanks. Only once did she look him in the eye and say quietly, "You kept your word. You let me stay." Carver nodded, not trusting himself to speak. But the peace did not last. Peace never did in the Wild West. It started with riders. Carver saw them first from the rise near his north pasture, 4 men on lean horses, dust trailing behind. They didn't ride like ranchers or lawmen. They rode like wolves, scattered and slow, watching the land, measuring it. Outlaws. By the time Carver returned to the cabin, the riders were gone. But Clara noticed his silence as he ate. "You saw something," she said, more statement than question. "Could be trouble," he admitted. "Men out this way don't usually ride unless they mean to take." Her gaze darkened, but she said nothing more. That night, Carver kept his shotgun loaded by the door. He found himself listening for hoofbeats, long after the fire had burned to ash. 3 days later, the trouble came. Carver was hauling water when the sound of horses thundered up the trail. He grabbed his rifle and strode to the yard. 4 men dismounted, swaggering like they owned the dirt under their boots. The leader was a wiry fellow with a scar down his cheek and eyes like snake glass. "Mornin', rancher," the man drawled. "Name's Silas Boone. Me and my boys been looking over this here spread. Mighty fine land. Mighty fine cattle." Carver rested the rifle against his shoulder. "Ain't for sale." Boone's smile was thin. "Didn't say nothing 'bout buyin'. Folks like us, we take what we need." Before Carver could answer, Clara stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Boone's gaze flicked to her, and his grin widened. "Well now," he said, "didn't know you had company. Pretty little thing. What's your name?" "Darlin'." Clara's chin lifted. "Not yours to know." Boone laughed, but his eyes glinted with menace. "Feisty. I like that." Carver shifted his rifle. "You best get back on your horses." The standoff stretched, dust swirling between them. Boone weighed his chances. Finally, he spat in the dirt. "Fine. We'll ride on. But we'll be back, rancher. Don't you forget it." The outlaws mounted and thundered off, leaving silence heavy as stone. Clara stood frozen, fists clenched. Carver lowered his rifle, his jaw tight. "This ain't the end," he muttered. That night, as coyotes howled in the distance, Clara spoke softly across the dim light of the fire. "Those men, they'll come again." Carver nodded. "They always do." She looked at him then, her eyes burning with something deeper than fear. "I told you I'd work for free. Forever. But I should have said more. I came here because I was running. From men like them. From worse." Her voice broke, but she steadied it. "If you let me stay, I'll fight beside you. Whatever comes." Carver met her gaze. He'd lived a long time alone, walls around his heart higher than the messes outside. But in that moment, something shifted. "Clara," he said quietly, "you're safe here. I swear it. As long as I live, you're safe." And in that vow, the first bond was forged, not of coin or convenience, but of something stronger, something that would soon be tested by fire and blood. The horizon was already burning with the storm to come. The sky over the desert turned the color of bruised steel. By sundown, thunder rolled across the messes, promising a storm. But the storm that mattered was already galloping toward John Carver's ranch. For 3 days, Clara had moved about the cabin with quiet determination, patching up what she could, stockpiling food, and keeping her rifle within reach. Carver watched her with a strange mixture of pride and unease. She wasn't the same woman who'd knocked timidly on his porch beam. Something fierce had awakened in her. Carver knew the outlaws would come again. Men like Silas Boone didn't ride off to forget. They rode off to sharpen their knives and bide their time. And when they came, they'd bring hell with them. The sheriff's warning 2 mornings later, Sheriff Hayes rode up the trail with his deputy, dust hanging thick around their horses. Hayes was a broad, shouldered man with a handlebar mustache and the wary eyes of someone who'd seen too many burials. "Carver," he said as he reined in, "word is Boone's gang is gathering. They hit a stagecoach yesterday. 2 men dead, driver shot clean through the heart. They're reddin' this way." Carver leaned on his fence post. "I figured." The sheriff's gaze shifted to Clara, who stood in the doorway with her shawl drawn close. His brow furrowed. "You best get her to town. Place like this won't hold against Boone's boys." Carver shook his head. "This land's mine. Ain't runnin'." Hayes sighed. Stubborn as ever, he pulled the reins. "You're on your own, Carver. But if Boone comes, it won't just be cattle he's after." His eyes lingered on Clara one last time before he and the deputy rode off, leaving a warning heavier than the desert heat. Clara stepped onto the porch. "He's right," she whispered. Carver met her gaze. "Maybe so. But I gave my word. The night riders, they came at dusk, shadows against the blood-red sky. 6 of them now, not 4. Boone had gathered strays and wolves to his pack. Their laughter carried on the wind, sharp and cruel. Carver and Clara were ready. The cattle had been driven to the far pasture, corralled tight. The cabin windows were shuttered. Inside, 2 rifles were loaded, shotguns waiting by the door. The hoofbeats thundered closer until the gang reined in at the yard. Boone's voice rang out. "Carver, thought I'd pay that visit I promised." Carver stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Clara stood behind him, her face pale but her eyes steady. "You've had your say, Boone," Carver called. "Now ride on." Boone grinned, teeth flashing in the dusk. "I don't think so. You got cattle, you got land, and you got her." He tipped his hat toward Clara. "I aim to take the lot." The men dismounted, spreading out like jackals. Carver raised his rifle. "First step you take, Boone, is your last." For a moment silence. The only sound was the creak of leather and the restless snort of horses. Then Boone barked a laugh. "Boys," he said, "burn it down." A fire and lit, the gang moved fast. Two rushed toward the barn with torches. Carver fired. The first outlaw fell hard into the dirt, not moving again. Clara fired next, her shot catching another in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Gunfire erupted, shattering the night. Bullets splintered the porch rail, tore through the cabin walls. Clara ducked, reloading with trembling hands. Carver kept his stance firm, returning fire with deadly precision. But Boone's men were many and the cabin small. One torch landed on the roof, flames licking upward. Smoke curled into the sky. Carver cursed. "Out the back, now." They scrambled through the rear door, darting toward the creek bed. The fire roared behind them, crackling like an angry beast. Bullets whined past. Clara stumbled, but Carver caught her, pulling her behind a boulder. Boone's voice cut through the smoke. "Run all you like, Carver? Ain't no place you can hide her?" The duel. When the flames died down, only embers remained of the cabin. The gang spread out, searching. Carver and Clara crouched in the shadows of the rocks. Carver knew it couldn't last. If Boone found them cowering, it would end with ropes and worse. There was only one way this would finish. He pressed the rifle into Clara's hands. "Stay here. Whatever happens, don't move till it's done." She shook her head, tears shining in the firelight. "You'll be killed, maybe," he said. "But I swore you'd be safe." Before she could stop him, he stepped into the clearing, revolver at his side. "Boone!" he shouted. His voice rang across the burning ruins. "This ends now. You want it settled, we settle it. Just you and me." The gang paused, muttering. Boone strode forward, grinning like a devil. "You got guts, rancher. All right? One shot, winner takes all." They faced each other in the glow of dying flames, hands hovering over holsters. The world shrank to two men, two guns, and the breathless silence between. The draw was lightning fast. Boone's pistol cleared leather, but Carver was faster. His shot struck true. Boone staggered, eyes wide with shock, then collapsed into the dirt. The gang froze, leaderless. Carver cocked the hammer again, steady as stone. "Any man still standin'," he growled, "rides out now, or joins him." For a long heartbeat, no one moved. Then, one by one, the outlaws mounted and rode into the night, their courage gone. Aftermath, the ranch was gone. The cabin, the barn, blackened ruins, only ashes remained. Clara stepped out from the rocks, her face pale in the firelight. "You kept your vow," she whispered. Carver lowered his revolver, chest heaving. "Not without a price." She took his hand, her fingers trembling against his calloused grip. "Then we pay it together." He looked at her, truly looked. In her eyes he saw not fear but strength, not despair but resolve. The dawn broke over the horizon, washing the land in gold. They stood amidst the ruins, two souls bound not by bargain, but by fire and blood and a vow that had held true. The Wild West was a place that took more than it gave. But for John Carver and Clara, it had given something rare, a bond worth fighting for, worth rebuilding upon. And so, with the smoke still rising behind them, they turned toward the open trail, side by side, ready to carve a new life from the dust,